Bună ziua, doamnelor și domnilor! Astăzi vom discuta despre geopolitică și metavers. Invitatul meu este fostul diplomat britanic Shaun Riordan, care astăzi reprezintă Institutul European de Studii Internaționale și care este invitat la Cluj pentru a conferenția în această seară de la ora 17 la sediul Centrului Regional al Matias Corvinus Collegium pe strada Iuliu Maniu numărul 6, un eveniment cu participare liberă, iar tema este foarte interesantă, așa că cei care aveți oportunitatea de a avea timp liber puteți să participați la această dezbatere foarte, foarte interesantă pe care o prefațăm aici la Via Cluj TV cu un interviu în limba engleză care se va referi tocmai la aceste teme. Thank you very much for coming here in Via Cluj studio.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
We are talking about geopolitics and metaverse. What is the sense of this term geopolitics?
Okay, for me geopolitics is the political interpretation of geography. It's not that geography decides politics, because geography changes. So when I was a very young diplomat, I remember we were obsessed by the Fulda Gap in the middle of Germany. This is where the Soviet tanks were going to come thundering through into Western Europe. Now Fulda is a completely irrelevant village in the middle of a unified Germany. Today we're all worried about the Suwalki Gap between Poland and Lithuania that would allow the Russians to link Belarus with Kaliningrad. Of course, in the Cold War that had no importance whatsoever because it's all well within the Soviet bloc. So it's important to understand that the political meaning of geography changes. Now, it may seem strange to talk about geography in the context of cyberspace or in context of the metaverse, because surely this is just up in the cloud there. It doesn't have geography. But of course it does have geography. Internet cables, internet switching stations, data storage facilities, the rare earth metals we need to construct all of this technology, supply chains that comes from, the dependencies at an international level. Why are we so worried about Taiwan at the moment? Because of the production of microchips in Taiwan. And that's part of the increasing tensions between the Americans and the Chinese. So we have to remember that, first of all our new technology has geographical dependencies. But then, once you create these virtual areas, they in themselves can become areas for geopolitical competition, where countries are trying to dominate new technologies. So we see that with cyberspace, we see cybersecurity issues, where these become domains for geopolitical competition. Even in terms of our mobile telephones, where we see the Americans trying to keep Huawei out of our 5G mobile networks. Again, this is geopolitical competition. So I think there are many ways in which geopolitics and these new technologies like the metaverse come together. And the metaverse itself, I think, has particular geopolitical challenges.
What is the meaning of this concept, metaverse?
Well, we could take the Mark Zuckerberg definition, as he declared himself the guru of the metaverse, and the idea of creating a global virtual world, an alternative reality to which you will have access, where there will be continuity in your avatar. So what you've done the day before will continue to be there as a memory for that, where essentially you can live a virtual online life in parallel to the life that you live offline. And where you can play games, you can interact with people, have social interactions. It can support education, and it can support economy. So you would be using cryptocurrencies or other digital tokens to buy things online, which could be buying access to games, could be buying entitlement in games or entitlement to education programs, and so on. So that's the kind of thing that Mark Zuckerberg is describing. How you get there is rather different, because the technological challenges, before we even get to geopolitical challenges, technological challenges are significant. And at the moment, we don't have the computational power to generate the kind of single metaverse that Mark Zuckerberg seems to be talking about. An alternative way of thinking about it is think about all the gaming platforms that exist, and how these gaming platforms progressively can link together, allowing you interoperability across different gaming platforms. So the personality you have in one gaming platform, you might be able to take into another platform and play other games. And that would be a much more gradual progression of building up an alternative online, initially gaming world, but then can start getting to economies, because in these games you buy tokens, you buy powers, and so on. So already this kind of online gaming economy, and then extending that into education, because gaming is an obvious way of educating for the future. Extending it into company management, where you can game things online as part of developing your strategies. So that would be an alternative way of building the metaverse.
But this kind of development is depending also on technologies like artificial intelligence, or not?
Yes, artificial intelligence becomes a really important part of building up these new technologies. And in the future, possibly also things like quantum computing, although we're not there yet. The major problem I think we've got, well, I think there are two problems. One is the computing power. We simply don't have the computing power to do all of this at the moment. And secondly, the energy it's consuming. We tend to think of the online world as being this online, it doesn't consume energy, it doesn't do any environmental damage, it doesn't pollute anywhere. But mining cryptocurrencies requires more energy now than the entire gold mining industry in the world.
It's huge.
And the amount of energy, that's got to be generated from somewhere. And at the moment, it's mainly been generated by carbon-based electrical production.
And in this period of time, the energy is not quite cheap.
Exactly. And I think one of the other things, comments to make about the metaverse, is that it's very different from the internet in geopolitical terms. So the internet is basically created in the United States of America, not actually for nuclear command and control. That's a lovely urban myth, but it's not quite true. But it is created by the Pentagon, or it's created by academics, researchers working at the Pentagon as a way of communicating in between each other. And they decide all the operating protocols. They decide all the rules about how it functions. So when it gets onto the real world and we expand out as a global internet, the rest of the world just has to take it or leave it. And it comes to the world in the period of the 1990s where America's dominant. It's the dominant global hegemon, unquestioned.
Only superpower.
Yeah, Russia is very weak. China's only just started rising. So it's not really challenged. It's very difficult to challenge you. You can either say you're not having it, or you accept what you're given. That's not true of the metaverse. The metaverse has been announced in advance. So countries are going to be thinking about, well, do we want a global metaverse? The answer from China is going to be no. Countries like Russia are not going to want a global metaverse, or they're going to want a global metaverse where they can cause trouble. The European Union is going to want a very different metaverse to the United States of America. The US is going to want less regulation. The European Union is going to want to regulate it as much as it can. So we're going to start off.
But also there is the possibility to have others, big players like, countries from South America, Brazil, for example.
Yeah, and countries like India. With all technological capabilities that the Indians have got.
The huge amount of specialists in IT, for example.
Exactly, which was a deliberate government program back in the 1980s and 1990s. There can be different visions of what the metaverse should be like, what the metaverse is for, and these are going to compete. So we're going to start with this competition about what should it be like. Should we have one metaverse? Should we have multiple metaverses? How compatible should they be? We're going to have issues like if there's going to be a metaverse economy, and all the people I've spoken to insist that without an internal economy, the metaverse doesn't make sense. Then who is going to guarantee contracts or enforce contracts? Who's going to guarantee property rights? In the real world, we rely on government to do that. Will we have a global metaverse governance body to do that? Or will individual governments be doing it? We know how difficult that's been with the internet.
And how can somebody prevent deep fakes, for example, using artificial intelligence?
It gets very much harder. I think we've already got that problem. So we've got the problem if you use AI to develop deep fakes, they're getting better and better. And actually the way that the competition works in favour of the deep fakes, not the deep fake identification. Because deep fakes have been generated from this generative alternative networks, in which you have the neural network generating the deep fake in competition with another neural network that's trying to identify the fake, so that they continually get better. That
One
means
step forward, yeah.
Yeah, and that means that if you start introducing other software to try and identify deepfakes, it just goes into an existing dynamic. And if you think about deepfakes, even now going onto YouTube, the speed with which they spread, the algorithms underlying YouTube that make sure they're going to go to people who want to believe them, is already dangerous. Metaverse would just make that much worse and much harder. And that, I think, means we've got this kind of geopolitics operating in different ways in relation to the metaverse. One is in terms of construction. One is in terms of if we don't have a single metaverse, we have multiple metaverses, which are almost certain to happen. Geopolitical competition in between them. Is the Chinese metaverse going to try and take down an American metaverse?
Or the Russian one.
Or the Russian one just trying to take down everybody because it's mundane, there's nothing else to do. And then we've got the geopolitics actually inside the metaverse, which is your deep fake and disinformation operations, propaganda. So we've got geopolitical challenges at multiple levels.
But how can we face these kind of challenges?
I think we have to face these kind of challenges. One of my themes for my visit here, by rescuing diplomacy. We've kind of given up on diplomacy in more traditional ways. So rescuing a kind of diplomacy that's based around interest, understand other countries' interests, and then try to identify where those interests coincide and build agreements on the basis of that. A kind of diplomacy which looks to manage problems, not solve them, which is what diplomacy has very much been traditionally. That, I think, we need to have it. And you're going to have diplomacy at different levels. So even the construction of the metaverse, you're going to have companies, users, governments, international organizations, and all of them are going to have to interact. And the requirements for diplomacy between all those different actors is going to be significant. And one of the challenges that was actually put to me was that governments may have a problem in that they can't pay as much as internet companies for their diplomats. So we may actually have a shortage of diplomats. I'm looking forward to that in my retirement. I'm still hopeful. But then you're going to have develop the diplomacy of debating what are the governance rules. Even if you constructed a metaverse, what are the governance rules going to be? What are the protocols going to be? And I think the least important part is what people have been talking about. Well, will you have an embassy in the metaverse? I think actually that's the last thing we need to be worrying about.
You are talking about the different kind of actors in diplomacy, but also in the real diplomacy you have civil society like Red Cross Society or Order of Malta Relief Service. What is going to be their role in the diplomacy of the metaverses?
Well, I think the first thing is how can you use the metaverse to actually generate resources that you can use in the real world? We've seen it quite interestingly how you've been able to use social media platforms to build interactive maps of disaster zones. Because these days we're in an earthquake, we don't take shelter, we of course get our mobile phone out and start filming it and uploading it on social media platforms, which is actually a very valuable tool. You can use that to build interactive. So the idea that you could build interactive maps on the metaverse of humanitarian disasters or where you need it, that you can use the metaverse to raise money, to raise funds. So that would be your traditional non-governmental actors. But then you get the development of non-governmental actors more specific to the metaverse. What are the challenges? What does metaverse poverty mean? What are the problems of exclusion in the metaverse? So, social divide, psychological problems in the metaverse. What does the metaverse do to people? So the idea that you could have non-governmental actors coming in, humanitarian actors coming in to the metaverse to deal with metaverse-specific problems, the kind of problems the metaverse is going to generate. And we're not quite sure what they're going to be, but we can guess, I think, from a lot of the problems we're seeing in social media platforms, with children who are feeling bullied or feeling isolated, high levels of mental illness now being seen among social media platform users. We can get a fair idea of the kind of challenges.
And not only kids, also different kind of persons who are bullied or, I don't know, exposed to public shame or...
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a good novel about the metaverse called Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. And it kind of explores what's it like to be on a global, because here you just have the one global metaverse run by a series of companies that work together. And one of the points he makes is about social exclusion on the metaverse. How many people actually get access? And what does that mean for the people who don't get access?
Recently, I participated to a tech event dedicated to the conquest of cosmic space. We should concentrate our energy to create a virtual reality or realities in metaverse or metaverses, or should we concentrate our energies to conquest this cosmic space?
I personally think we should concentrate our energies on sorting out the mess we've made of our own planet. Because all of these technological developments we're looking at create new energy problems, they create new climate change problems, and they create new geopolitical dependencies. And if we don't take into account those realities, it doesn't matter whether we're going into cosmic space or we're going into cyberspace, we're simply going to go on repeating the errors that as humans we've been making over 2,000 years.
But how can we defend in this context the old values of democracy, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and so on?
I think we have to defend them in the same ways that we always have, but bear in mind that none of these freedoms are absolute. So the idea that you can have freedom of speech in cyberspace in an absolute sense, that you can upset people, you can insult people, you can provoke hatred, should be no more real than it would be in physical space. The problems we've got is the problems of internet governance. And I think one of the major problems we're getting there is because we focus on dealing with only dealing with countries who are like us, only dealing with countries that share our values, we make it very difficult to establish global internet governance. So it's very difficult to establish rules that apply internationally. Whether we're talking about cyberspace, we talk about metaverse, these issues come up. I think we have to understand also that we cannot impose our values and our political systems on the rest of the world. If China does not want to be a democracy, that's not our problem. That's China's problem.
Who is going to ask the people of China? Because the political system in China, it's very, very repressive. We experienced that during the communist years in Romania. And nobody asked us if we want democracy, we want communism, we want to become kingdom again.
What would you like to have done during the communist years in Romania? Would you like us to have invaded? Would you have liked us to have broken off all contact, had no contact with the government here? Would you like us to have imposed economic embargoes that would have made the people even poorer?
You know,
I mean, the sad thing is sometimes there are no solutions.
Was better to prevent the installation of the communist regime, but countries from eastern part of Europe were abandoned in the hands of the Soviet Union.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
But understanding at international level, there are limits on what you can do. And that trying to do things like overthrow communism in China, for example, would result in a global war in which millions would die.
Or milliards.
Yeah.
Billions.
So there are limits on how far you take that. That ultimately must be for the Chinese people to deal with.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for
It's been a pleasure.
this interview. Prieteni, vă mulțumesc și vouă, ne vedem pe net.